Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel PsyAcademy. In the previous classes, in the first and the second part, we talked about Freud. तो हमने पहले और सेकेंड पार्ट में सिगमंड फ्रॉइड की बात की थी. उनकी जो साइकोएनालिटिक थ्योरी है, वी टॉक्ड अबाउट दैट. बट इन टुडेज क्लास वी विल start since from this class onwards we'll start talking about the Neo-Freudians. ओके, सो अभी तक हमने फ्रॉइड की बात की, उनकी थ्योरी की बात की, बट अब हम न्यू-फ्रॉइडियंस की बात करेंगे. सो लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड. नाउ हु वर द न्यू-फ्रॉइडियंस? सो न्यू-फ्रॉइडियंस वर द अर्ली 20th century. You can write here, they were the early 20th century psychologists who built their own theories based on Freud's theories, Freud's concepts. But then some of the core beliefs of Freud's, the Neo-Freudians differed from those beliefs. So the Neo-Freudians built upon the beliefs, the concepts of Freud, but differed from them, also diverged from him in many respects. Sorry. So if we talk about how they differed from Freud, the very first point was there was less emphasis on sexual instincts or urges. So the first point was that the Neo-Freudians, they did not emphasize on sexual instincts as much as Sigmund Freud did. Also, more emphasis was on conscious, social as well as cultural factors, or rather we can say emphasis was also on these factors. So the Neo-Freudians, it's not that they did not pay attention or did not focus on the unconscious at all, they did, but then the focus was also on the conscious and as well as some social and cultural factors. We will study how each Neo-Freudian focused on different factors, but but besides the conscious, there was also focus on social and cultural factors, and less emphasis was there on the sexual instincts. That is the most important point here. So now we will talk about some important Neo-Freudians, although we will discuss them one by one as we study their theories, but some important ones were Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, Karen Horney, and Erik Erikson. So these were the four important Neo-Freudians that built on Freud's concepts, on Freud's theory, but then also differed from them significantly because they had different core beliefs. So now we'll talk about each of them. So today in this class we'll start with Carl Jung. Now before moving on, before starting with Carl Jung, let's also talk about a very simple but very important difference between these two terms, that is psychoanalysis and psychodynamics, because we tend to get confused in it at times. So what is psychoanalysis? It is the original theory or original concept given by Freud. It was given by Sigmund Freud. So we talked about psychoanalysis in our previous two classes. We talked about the psychoanalytic theory towards personality. Now psychoanalysis was a method that was developed by Sigmund Freud to deal with psychological disorders. and based on that, Freud built on that concept of psychoanalysis. He built the entire theory, his entire psychoanalytic theory, based on that very method, very concept. So this was the psychoanalysis, was the original method given by Sigmund Freud. Now if we talk about psychodynamics, that would be something that was again built on, or rather we write Freud's concepts, his beliefs, and it also includes contributions of the Neo-Freudians and some other theories. So when we talk about psychodynamics, that was built on Freud's concepts or his beliefs itself, but then it includes, it is, you could say it's more of a broad theory, a broad concept that was built on Freud's concepts, his beliefs, but it also includes contributions of some of all the Neo-Freudians and some other theorists as well. So this is the main distinction between psychoanalysis and psychodynamics. तो साइकोएनालिसिस ओरिजिनली फ्रॉइड ने दिया था, जो हमने पहले 2 क्लास में पढ़ा, बट जो साइकोडायनामिक्स है वो बिल्ड हुआ था, वो बना था फ्रॉइड के कॉन्सेप्ट, उनके बिलीफ पे ही, लेकिन प्लस मतलब उसके अलावा जो न्यू फ्रॉइडियंस हैं उनका भी कंट्रीब्यूशन काफ़ी हद तक है. तो साइकोडायनामिक्स एक ज़्यादा एक साइकोएनालिसिस का एक मॉडर्न वर्जन आप कह सकते हैं, एक ब्रॉडर टर्म है जिसमें फ्रॉइड के कॉन्सेप्ट्स प्लस जो न्यू फ्रॉइडियंस हैं और भी कुछ थियोरिस्ट्स हैं उनके कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस हैं साइकोडायनामिक्स में. तो ये दोनों में डिफरेंस हुआ. सो नाउ अब फाइनली हम लोग स्टार्ट करेंगे कार्ल यूंग. सो कार्ल यूंग, इफ़ वी टॉक अबाउट, ही वॉज अ स्विस psychiatrist. So Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist, but what is even more important is that he founded the analytical psychology. He founded analytical psychology. So all of his concepts that he gave, everything that he gave that were a part of his analytical psychology. So this is an important point. What Carl Jung gave was analytical psychology, and this is important because we need to remember that then there was Alfred Adler who gave individual psychology. So we'll study about that. But what did Carl Jung give? Carl Jung ने दिया था हमारा analytical psychology. अब he was a Swiss psychiatrist. और एक और important चीज़ that we need to remember is that Carl Jung used to be a follower of Sigmund Freud. They used to be very close, but then Carl Jung did not, they differed actually in their opinions, in their beliefs, especially when it came to the unconscious and the sexual instincts, as we talked about when we talked about the Neo-Freudians. So Carl Jung was a follower, used to be a follower of Sigmund Freud, but then he believed that human behavior, human motivation does not only stem from the unconscious or sexual instincts. So he believed, he had different beliefs from Freud, which we will study in the future. It's not that he disregarded the importance of the unconscious, but he did not believe that unconscious was the only reason for the motivation for our behavior. So that is how they parted ways, and he gave his own kind of own field of psychology, that is the analytical psychology. So now let's move on to study what all important points he gave to understand his approach, Carl Jung's approach towards personality. Now let us talk about the structure of psyche that was given by Carl Jung. Now psyche is basically the totality of an individual's personality. It could include the unconscious, the conscious, the thoughts, beliefs, and everything that forms the individual, the personality of the individual. So psyche I'm sorry, according to Carl Jung, was multi-layered. So it had different layers basically. So he talked about let's understand it like this. Let's understand how he classified or gave his structure of psyche. So when we talk about the unconscious, so we already said that he did focus on the unconscious, but he also paid attention to the conscious. Now when he talked about conscious, what came under the conscious would be the ego. Okay, now his ego is different, slightly different from Freud's ego. We'll talk about that, but this is our conscious, and then we have our unconscious, which has our personal unconscious and our collective unconscious. So this is what we need to understand, that our conscious consists of our ego, but our unconscious consists of, or we could say there are two kinds of unconscious that he talked about, that is the personal unconscious as well as the collective unconscious. Now point wise we'll discuss about these three concepts. Now Carl Jung's ego is, according to him, it's the center of our consciousness. Jung को, कार्ल यूंग के अकॉर्डिंग जो ईगो है वो कॉन्शियसनेस का सेंटर है. क्यों? बिकॉज इट कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स ऑफ एवरीथिंग दैट वी आर अवेयर ऑफ. जो भी जिस भी चीज़ का हमें आइडिया है कि हमारे बारे में, फॉर एग्जांपल हमारे जो थॉट्स हैं जिनके बारे में हम अवेयर हैं, आर थॉट्स, आर परसेप्शंस, our beliefs, everything that we are aware of, that forms an important part of our ego. Okay, now one thing to note here is that while ego is important, it forms an important part of our daily functioning, but it is not the center of the psyche. So what do we mean by this? That if we compare it to Freud's ego. Now what was that? Freud's ego was more like a mediator that was trying to control, that was trying to balance out, that was trying to maintain an equilibrium between the id, the urges of the id, and the urges of the superego. So it was a very important part of the Freud's psyche. But if we talk about Jung's psyche, here the ego is important for our daily functioning, but it is not the center of our psyche. So we will study what is more important in Freud's structure of psyche. But what we need to remember is that it is the center of our consciousness. Why? Because it consists of everything that we are aware of, our thoughts, our perceptions, our memories, everything that we are aware of, that forms the ego. Next we'll talk about the personal unconscious. So Carl Jung's personal unconscious was pretty similar to Freud's unconscious. But then what's the difference? That the difference was that it was not as repressed or pathological. We'll write here, it was not as repressed or pathological as Freud's unconscious. We'll see how, we'll understand how. Now secondly, it consisted of some forgotten memories, some suppressed experiences. So this is a different point. So this is there. Now I'm sorry, if we talk about Carl Jung's personal unconscious, it was pretty similar to Freud's concept of unconscious, but the only difference was that it was not as repressed or as pathological. Now pathological, we mean that Freud said, so first of all, repressed. So he believed, we talked about how Freud believed that everything that you push into the unconscious, it is not, you would not be able to bring it back to your conscious all on your own, that you would need the help of a therapist, of a psychoanalyst to bring that memory into your conscious. And when he says pathological, so Freud believed that all these suppressed memories, the repressed memories and everything, all those traumatic experiences that you push into your unconscious, that stay in your unconscious, that motivate your behavior and that could lead to disorders. But in Carl Jung's concept of personal unconscious, they still consist of forgotten memories, of some suppressed experiences, but they were not the reason as much of some disorders, or they so they were not as grave, as serious that they could lead to disorders. So this is the difference from unconscious that was given by Freud. But now this is like we understand what the personal unconscious consists of, but then a very important point that we did not discuss till yet is that the personal unconscious consists of complexes. So the most important point in Carl Jung's personal unconscious are his complexes. Now what are these complexes? They are emotionally charged themes that influence behavior unconsciously. So our complexes are emotionally, they are related to emotions, they are emotionally charged themes that influence the behavior, but they do that unconsciously. So these complexes, they are a group of unconscious thoughts, feelings, memories that are centered around, or that you could say the basis, the foundation of these unconscious thoughts, memories could be some common themes. Some themes like you could say love, rejection, power. So these extreme kind of themes or emotions could be the reason for these certain kinds of unconscious thoughts and feelings that you have. Now the reason for these, why these complexes form, could be some emotionally intense kind of, we'll write it here, some emotionally intense experiences that you must have had. If you, according to Carl Jung, if you have a complex, then you must have had some emotionally intense experiences that were, that made you feel some kind of extreme emotion, basically maybe extreme anger, extreme love and everything. So maybe some experiences, some emotionally intense experiences you must have had in your childhood, according to Jung, which could have led to these complexes, and which these unconscious thoughts and perceptions, they show through your behavior unconsciously. Now let us take an example and try to understand this better if this seems complex itself. So let's take an example of mother's complex. So a mother's complex, an example of that would be, let's say there is a man who had a very controlling mother, so she was very dominant, she was very controlling, and as a result of that, when that individual grows up, that individual becomes an adult, they have very extreme kind of opinions, emotions towards women, women who are controlling. So one result of the complex could be that they act very aggressively, that they basically hate women who are very dominant, who are very controlling. Or another result could be that this individual turns into a very submissive person who gives in very easily to submissive or dominant women. So since they had a mother like that, so that emotionally charged them to feel a certain way towards this kind of women, the women who are very dominant or very controlling. So this is an example of a mother's complex, or this is an example of a complex itself. So now we will move on to our final kind of layer we could say that forms the structure of our Jung psyche. Now finally we'll talk about the third layer, that is our collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious is a universal layer that is shared by all humans. So this is not unique to the individual, unlike the personal unconscious, since the term itself here is collective. So it is the collective unconscious is an universal layer that is shared by all humans, and we inherit the collective unconscious from our ancestors. So this is our collective unconscious, something that is universal, that is common to all individuals, and something that we inherit from our ancestors. Now the very important point here is that the collective unconscious consists of something called archetypes. Now this is a very important point, and it is an entire concept. The different kinds of archetypes, what these are, what its types are, we'll study further. So what we need to remember here is that our collective unconscious is what contains the archetypes. Now let's go ahead and study about the archetypes themselves. Now let's talk about archetypes. So archetypes are innate, they are universal, and they are inherited. Symbols or patterns. So if we talk about archetypes, they are symbols or patterns of behavior that are innate, that is, they are present from birth. They are universal they are universal, that is as we talked about in the collective unconscious, that they are common to all humans. So they are universal and they are inherited from our ancestors. So we already talked about how it is the archetypes are a part a very important part of our collective unconscious. Now, what do these archetypes do? They shape how we perceive, how we interpret, how we relate, and how we express. So what are archetypes? Like, what do they do? So archetypes shape how we perceive the world, how we look at the world. Then they also shape how we interpret all of these experiences that we have in the world, all sorts of experiences. How do we interpret them? They also shape how we relate to others, and they also shape how we express ourselves through our behaviors, maybe art or all sorts of things. How do we express ourselves? So according to Carl Jung, archetypes are blueprints for our behavior, but then although they are universal, they are supposed to be common to all humans, they are also expressed uniquely. That is, they are expressed in a unique manner depending on each individual's personality and experiences. So this is our archetype. If we quickly recap, they are innate, they are universal, and they are inherited from our ancestors. They shape how we understand everything around us and how we express ourselves. And finally, while Carl Jung did say that they are blueprints for our behavior, he also said that since each individual is different, although these archetypes are common amongst all human beings, yet since we are unique, we are different, we have different experiences, we have different personalities, so we express these archetypes in unique manners. Let us end this class here, and since we earlier talked about how we don't want to make these classes longer, despite that they were becoming longer, so let's stop this class here, and in the next class we'll continue with the different types of archetypes and also types of personalities that Carl Jung gave. So this would be it for our classes today. See you next time. Thank you.